Claire Monroe didn't flinch. She moved quickly through the front porch of the Langston House Inn, pulling damp sheets off the clothesline one by one, her fingers aching from the chill. Inside, her daughter was drawing. A picture of a garden Claire had never seen, with flowers she couldn't name and a sun too big for the sky. The phone in the front office rang twice before the inn's owner, Debbie Langston, called out, "Claire, you mind?" Claire wiped her hands on her apron and stepped inside. The storm rattled the windows. Her shoes squeaked across the wooden floor. "Langston House Inn, this is Claire." A panicked voice on the other end, a girl's voice, breathing hard. I got lost. I was walking with Aunt Eleanor and then she went inside the bookstore and The line crackled. Thunder boomed overhead. "Sweetheart, slow down. Where are you right now?" "I think I passed a yellow gate. And there's a statue of a lady with wings?" Claire's heart stopped. "I know exactly where you are. Don't move, okay? Stay right there. I'm coming to get you." She didn't ask permission. Debbie had seen the look in her eyes. Pure mother mode. Claire grabbed an umbrella, shoved her feet into boots 2 sizes too big, and dashed into the storm. She found the girl on the edge of Forsyth Park, near the marble angel that stood watch over the oldest part of the square. Her hair was soaked, her sneakers caked in mud. She was maybe 9, frightened but not crying. "You must be Emma," Claire said gently, kneeling beside her. "I'm Claire. Your aunt called. You're safe now." Emma nodded, then did something that undid Claire entirely. She reached out and held her hand without hesitation. Claire walked her back slowly. The umbrella barely held, and both of them were soaked by the time they stepped inside the inn. Debbie's eyes widened. "She's Graham Whittaker's niece." Claire looked down at the girl, whose teeth were chattering now. "The Graham Whittaker?" Debbie nodded, mouthing billionaire. "He's on his way." Claire wrapped Emma in a towel and made hot cocoa in the break room. The girl clutched the mug like it held magic. "What's your favorite color?" Emma asked suddenly. Claire blinked. "Green, I think." "Like the garden you smell after it rains," the girl said, nodding as if she already knew. Claire smiled. "Exactly like that." Minutes later, the door opened again. It was quiet, unannounced. No car screeching to a halt, no shouting. Just a man standing still on the threshold. He wore a long coat, soaked to the hem, and dark glasses even in the dim light. Claire noticed he didn't reach for the doorknob. He waited until someone opened it from inside. Eleanor rushed in behind him. "She's here. Emma's okay." Graham Whittaker stepped forward. Claire had seen his face before, in newspapers, on screens, in whispers traded over linen tables. But in person, he was something else entirely. Not cold, just unreachable, like a building with no entrance. He spoke quietly. "Emma?" The girl ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You're wet," she said, laughing through tears. "So are you," he answered, and there was a smile behind his voice that caught Claire by surprise. Eleanor noticed her then. "You found her?" Claire stood, nodding. "She called. Sounded scared. I knew the statue she described." Graham turned slightly toward her voice. His movements were controlled, like someone who counted every step. "Thank you," he said. Claire didn't expect the impact of his presence. His voice was low but certain, not demanding, not boastful, just still. "She was brave," Claire said. "Didn't panic, just needed someone to reach back." He nodded slowly. Then he asked, "Can I speak with you privately?" Eleanor blinked. "Graham, she's the one who helped my niece." Claire followed him into the sitting room. The storm had quieted outside, but the air still smelled like moss and wet brick. Graham leaned on the back of a chair, not sitting. "I can't see your face," he said, "but I can hear your steadiness." Claire tilted her head. "That's an interesting thing to say." "I don't say much that isn't," he replied. "Are you a mother?" "Yes," Claire answered. "Emma's 9. "So is my Emma," he said. "Funny how names cycle like weather." She looked at him, unsure of what to say. He finally sat, folding his hands. "I live on Oglethorpe Lane. My housekeeper broke her wrist last week. Temporary opening. I trust people who act instead of ask. Would you consider coming by?" Claire hesitated. "You don't know anything about me." "I know how you sound when someone's scared. I know how you didn't ask who I was before helping my niece. That's more than I know about most." He stood slowly, offering his hand in her direction. "I'm Graham Whitaker." She took it. "Claire Monroe." The handshake was brief, but something in it hummed, like recognition without explanation. Back in the hallway, Emma waved at Claire. "You smell like lemon and soap." Claire smiled. "That's my signature perfume." Graham turned toward them. "We'll see you Monday morning?" Claire hesitated, then nodded. Monday morning. As he left, Claire watched his silhouette disappear through the rain-misted glass, and something stirred in her chest. Not romance, not yet, but something stranger, like curiosity blooming in soil she'd thought long dried out. Back upstairs, her daughter was still drawing. Claire leaned over. "What you working on?" Emma grinned. "A house in a garden." Claire smiled faintly. "Make sure you leave room for roots." If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Claire stood at the bottom of the long curved driveway on Oglethorpe Lane, staring up at the house she'd only seen from a distance. It didn't tower like a mansion. It leaned, like it had been waiting too long for someone to open its windows. The shutters were painted hunter green, slightly faded. Ivy clung to the brick like secrets. It wasn't cold, but Claire shivered anyway. She wasn't new to working in big homes, but this one felt different. Not because of the size, because of what it didn't show. The front door didn't boast. The curtains didn't part. It was a house with its back turned. She took a breath and stepped forward. The front door opened before she could knock. A woman in her early 60s with silver hair tied into a perfect chignon gave her a brief once-over. "You must be Claire." "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Miriam. I handle the schedule here. Follow me." Claire stepped inside and was immediately struck by the stillness. No music, no ticking clock, no scent of food or flowers. Just quiet, the kind that settles into walls over time. Miriam led her through a wide foyer, marble floors, a sweeping staircase, everything spotless, but sterile. "You'll be responsible for the West Wing," Miriam said briskly. "Bedrooms, laundry, some light meal prep if asked. Mr. Whitaker prefers simplicity. No perfumes, no loud shoes, no unsolicited conversation." Claire raised an eyebrow. "He made all that clear?" Miriam stopped walking. "He doesn't have to. Some of us remember how it was before." Claire didn't ask what that meant. Instead, she followed through a pair of French doors into the back corridor. Large windows lined the wall, but the drapes were drawn tight. Miriam stopped at a door. "This is the linen room. Supplies are labeled." Claire glanced around. It was organized to the inch. Something about the precision made her feel unwelcome. "And his room?" Miriam hesitated. "You won't be cleaning it today, or this week. Mr. Whitaker maintains his own space." Claire nodded, then asked quietly, "Does he live alone?" Miriam's voice softened, just slightly. "He's alone now?" Claire didn't press, but the question lingered as she moved through the hallway, starting her first task, dusting the side shelves. The house didn't need much cleaning. It needed air. It needed music. It needed someone to care. By noon, she was halfway through folding bedsheets in the laundry room when she heard footsteps, soft but deliberate. She turned and saw him. Graham Whitaker. No sunglasses today. Just steady eyes that looked straight ahead, unfocused but confident. He didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway. Claire didn't speak either. "I can hear you folding," he said finally. "You don't slam the fabric like the others did. You press into it." Claire swallowed a smile. "I guess I treat linens the way I treat people. Soft hands?" "Number respectfully." He took a step forward, hands brushing along the doorframe to orient himself. "This house is too quiet," he said. "I was thinking the same thing," she replied. "It doesn't feel lived in, just used." He tilted his head. "And yet you stayed." "I gave my word. Besides, I'm curious." "About what?" She shrugged. "What makes a man like you hire someone like me after one conversation in a rainstorm?" His lips twitched at that. "I heard your steadiness, remember?" Claire nodded. "You did say that." A pause stretched between them. He turned slightly. "There's a piano in the east sitting room. Hasn't been touched since Eleanor's wedding rehearsal. You play?" "No," she said, "but I listen well." He nodded, then added softly, "It's strange." Hearing a voice and wondering what the face behind it looks like. Claire stepped closer, aware of her own breath. "What do you imagine I look like?" He smiled, barely. Practical shoes, tired eyes, strong chin, and a mouth that holds back more than it says. Claire blinked. "That's accurate." He let the silence hang before saying, "And what about me? What do you think I look like?" Claire exhaled. A man who knows what grief sounds like, even when no one's crying. That hit something. He didn't flinch, but his fingers tightened slightly at his sides. "I think I hired the wrong woman," he said after a moment. Claire's heart sank for a split second. But then he added, "You see too much." She smiled, just a little. "I hear too much, too." Footsteps echoed down the hall. Eleanor appeared holding a basket of fresh towels. She stopped when she saw Claire and Graham standing close. "I see the introductions have already happened," Eleanor said smoothly. "Yes," Claire answered. "We were just discussing the piano." Eleanor set the basket down and walked toward them. "Claire, may I have a word?" Claire nodded, following her into the next room. It was a sunroom, though no sun entered. The windows were shuttered. Eleanor shut the door gently. "I appreciate what you did for Emma. I truly do. But this house is delicate. My brother doesn't let people in easily." Claire folded her arms. "I'm not trying to let myself in. I was invited." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I believe that. But I've seen people mistake his silence for opportunity. He's not a project. He's not broken. He just doesn't belong to the world the same way he used to." Claire looked at her, measured. "I'm not here to fix anyone, Miss Whitaker. I've got a daughter, bills, and 2 jobs. I don't have time to collect men." That seemed to settle something. Eleanor's posture softened. "Good," she said, "because if you ever hurt him, you won't need to be warned. You'll know it in your own chest." Claire didn't respond. She didn't need to. She left the room quietly and went back to work. But her mind was still turning. That night after dinner, she passed by the east sitting room. The door was open a crack. Inside, Graham sat on the bench beside the piano. He wasn't playing, just resting his fingers on the keys, as if listening for something long gone. Claire stood in the doorway, unseen. Then softly, almost as if he sensed her, "Do you think people are born alone? Or choose to be?" Claire didn't hesitate. "I think some people choose to be alone so they never have to feel someone leave again." He didn't turn around, but he didn't ask her to leave either. Claire found herself arriving earlier each morning. not because she had to, but because there was something about the stillness of the Whitaker house at dawn that made her feel oddly calm. Savannah's humid air clung to her arms as she stepped up the stone path, the magnolia trees along the drive heavy with blossoms just beginning to open. Inside, the quiet was different now. It wasn't hollow anymore. It was waiting. She started her day with the linens, but her thoughts kept drifting to the sitting room, to the soundless piano keys under Graham's fingertips, to the question he'd asked her like it had been sitting on his chest for years. Do you think people are born alone, or choose to be? Claire had lain awake last night thinking about that, about how many times she had chosen solitude just to feel safe, and how safe had ever really felt like silence, until now. By mid-morning, she was wiping down the library shelves when she heard footsteps again. Not Graham's. He moved differently, measured. These were sharper, more pointed. Miss Monroe. Claire turned. Eleanor stood at the door, a newspaper folded under one arm. Yes, ma'am. You have a visitor. Claire blinked. A visitor? In the kitchen. Her stomach dropped. There were very few people who knew she worked here, and none she expected. She followed Eleanor down the hallway, her pulse kicking up with every step. When she walked into the kitchen, she nearly stopped breathing. Emma. Her daughter sat on a stool at the counter, legs swinging, a juice box in her hand. Hi, Mama, Emma chirped. Claire dropped her cloth and rushed to her. What are you doing here? I got dropped off. Miss Debbie said it was okay if I came to see you. Claire blinked. She just dropped you off? She said it was safe. Mr. Whitaker's house is like a castle. Claire turned toward the hallway, just as Graham appeared, led gently by Miriam. I hope I didn't overstep, he said. Claire shook her head, trying to piece her voice together. I just wasn't expecting her. She's welcome here. Children bring balance. Emma slid off the stool and walked over to Graham. Do you know where your eyes used to be? Claire froze, but Graham didn't miss a beat. He knelt, just slightly, to be level with her. I do, he said gently. They're still here. They just don't work the same way. Emma touched the side of his face, her fingers soft against his cheek. My mama says when you close your eyes, your heart listens louder. Claire swallowed the knot in her throat. Graham turned toward her voice. She's very wise, your daughter. I wonder where she gets it, Claire murmured, brushing Emma's curls. Graham rose. Let her stay for the afternoon if you'd like. Miriam's baking bread, and I've found the library much livelier with young energy. Claire hesitated. Only if it's truly okay. It is, he said. Besides, I like the sound of laughter in this house. That afternoon passed with the soft cadence of something Claire didn't dare name. Emma explored the house like a storybook maze, discovering nooks and whispering corridors. At one point, she and Graham sat together in the library while Claire worked nearby. Emma asked if he could describe colors the way he remembered them. Green? She prompted. Alive, he said, and kind, like forgiveness. Claire paused her dusting. And blue? Steady, he answered, but sometimes lonely. Claire didn't speak. She couldn't. Later, as Emma drew pictures in the sunroom, Eleanor approached again, this time holding a small photograph. She offered it to Claire without a word. It was a picture of Graham, before. Standing beside a woman with bright eyes and windswept hair. They were on a dock, holding hands. Elise, Eleanor said softly. She died just months after the accident. Aneurysm. No warning. Claire looked at the photo. She wasn't surprised by the beauty of the woman, but she was struck by the way Graham had smiled then, wide, unguarded, undone by love. I wasn't trying to take up space, Claire whispered. I know, Eleanor replied, but space is what this house fears the most. We lost more than a person. We lost momentum. Claire looked at her. And now? Eleanor's voice softened. Now, I see someone planting roots again. Claire didn't reply, but the words settled somewhere deep inside her. That evening, as Emma packed up her drawings and Claire prepared to leave, Graham appeared again. He stood near the doorway, still in the same navy sweater he'd worn that morning, one hand lightly resting on the frame. "I heard you humming," he said. Claire turned. "While I cleaned?" "Yes. Something soft. A hymn?" "Be Thou My Vision. My grandmother used to sing it." He nodded slowly. "I haven't heard that in years." Claire didn't move closer. She didn't have to. "Why did you let her stay?" she asked quietly. "My daughter." "Because she reminded me of what it felt like to be known by someone who doesn't expect anything." Claire held his gaze even if he couldn't see it. "And me? You make silence feel like company." The words landed like weight and warmth at the same time. "I should go," Claire said. "Yes," he replied, "but I hope you come back." She walked out with Emma, holding her hand tighter than usual. The air outside had cooled, dusk settling over Savannah like a sigh. Claire didn't look back, but as she reached the sidewalk, Emma tugged her hand. "Is Mr. G sad all the time?" Claire considered the question. I think he just got really used to the quiet." Emma looked up. "Do you think he needs music again?" Claire smiled faintly. "I think he needs someone who won't stop humming." If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Claire didn't mean to find the garden. She wasn't looking for it. Not exactly. It was early, too early, even for Miriam, and the sun hadn't yet reached the windows. Claire had arrived with a basket of fresh herbs from the inn's cook, thinking maybe the kitchen could use some scent, something to cut through the sterile order of it all. But as she passed the hallway near the conservatory, she noticed a door cracked open, one she hadn't seen used. A soft breath of morning air curled in from behind it, carrying something faint. Jasmine, maybe, and earth. She paused, looked around, then nudged the door with her shoulder. Beyond it, a flagstone path curved gently into a forgotten courtyard, overgrown, untouched. Ivy curled through the cracks. Hydrangea bushes, untrimmed, sprawled across the stone walls. A rusting iron bench leaned beneath a large magnolia tree, its branches heavy with blossoms that hadn't yet opened. Claire stepped forward slowly, as if she were entering someone's memory. And she was. There, beside the path, half hidden in the brush, was a small sign, weather-worn, faded, but still legible. Elise's garden. Claire's breath caught. She stepped onto the path, careful not to disturb anything. Moss spread between the stones like lace. The garden wasn't dead. It was waiting. Wild, yes, untamed, but alive. She knelt by one of the hydrangeas, brushing away fallen leaves. The soil was dry, but not hopeless. Behind her, a voice. "I haven't been out there since the funeral." She turned. Graham stood in the doorway, no sunglasses, no coat, just a man in soft gray with hands loosely at his sides. Claire rose slowly. "I didn't mean to intrude. The door was open." "I left it open," he said. She stared at him, surprised. He moved forward carefully, tracing the shape of the wall with his fingertips. This was hers, Elise. Every morning she'd come out here with tea and a book she never finished. Claire glanced around. "It's still beautiful, just needs a little attention." Graham gave a small, dry laugh, like most of us. They stood in silence. The magnolia leaves above them rustled as the breeze shifted. Claire hesitated. Then, "Why haven't you restored it?" He turned slightly. "Because no one ever asked." Claire felt that in her chest. "I could," she offered, cautious. "Not for work, just for peace." He tilted his head. "What would you plant?" "Nothing new," she said. "Just what's already here, what loved her enough to stay." He nodded slowly. Then, almost inaudibly, "Okay." It was the first time he'd ever said yes to something without qualifying it. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Claire arrived early, spent her first hour in the garden. She didn't dig too deep, just cleared away rot, trimmed the hedges, brought in water from the kitchen in an old copper pitcher. She never asked for help, and no one offered. But sometimes, without announcing it, Graham would appear. He never sat. Just stood near the door, listening. On the third morning he asked, "Do the hydrangeas still bloom blue?" Claire smiled. "Yes. And the gardenias trying to bloom again." "That's good," he said softly. Elise liked the gardenia, said it reminded her of her mother's perfume. Claire paused. "She sounds like she was gentle." "She was fire," Graham said, "but quiet about it." Another morning he said, "You hum when you prune." Claire looked up from the rosebush. "Only when I forget anyone's listening." "You don't sing?" "Only in the car, windows down, bad pitch." He smiled. "I miss hearing music." Claire dusted soil from her hands. "Why don't you turn the stereo on?" "I did, once. It felt like noise." She considered that, then said quietly, "Maybe it's not the music. Maybe it's who you were listening for." He didn't reply, but she saw his hand curl slightly at his side, like he was gripping something invisible. That evening, as Claire gathered her things, Miriam approached her with a folded piece of paper. "From Mr. Whitaker." Claire opened it. "The garden feels lighter. Thank you." G. She traced the handwriting with her thumb. It wasn't perfect, a little jagged, but it was deliberate, real. The next day, Claire brought Emma. She didn't ask first. She just showed up with her daughter, 2 gardening gloves, and a bag of wildflower seeds. Graham met them at the garden entrance, and when he heard Emma's voice, he smiled. "I hear we have a new head gardener." Emma giggled. "I brought the seeds. Mama says wildflowers are brave because they grow anywhere." Claire froze, watching his reaction. But Graham's face softened. "That sounds like your mama knows what she's talking about." They worked together for an hour. Claire cleared the path, Emma scattered seeds, and Graham sat on the bench, listening, always listening. At one point Emma asked, "Do you think the flowers remember who planted them?" Claire glanced at Graham. He answered first. "Maybe not with memory, but with presence, the way a place holds on to the people who loved it." Claire's hands stilled, and for a moment everything felt still too. Like time paused just long enough to hold its breath. Later, as they packed up, Emma ran ahead to chase a butterfly near the fountain. Claire stood beside Graham. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not asking me to forget her. Everyone else does." Claire looked at him. "I wouldn't ask you to forget something beautiful." He nodded once. That's the first time someone said that without making it sound like a warning. Claire hesitated, then touched the edge of his hand. Not holding, just a brush. Barely there. "You don't need fixing, Graham." His voice was quiet. "Then why do I feel like I'm beginning again?" She smiled faintly. "Because you are." They didn't speak again, but the silence they shared felt nothing like before. It felt full, possible, alive. Claire stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, her hands deep in a basin of warm, soapy water. The morning light filtered in through the wide kitchen window, casting long shadows across the counter. Outside, the garden swayed gently in the breeze, alive now with blooms that hadn't dared rise in months. Hydrangeas blushed pale blue, the gardenias finally open, wildflowers dotting the edges like a whisper that summer was near. She caught herself humming again, soft, low, almost under breath. Graham's words echoed from days earlier. You hum when you prune. And now? She hummed even when she wasn't trying to. Miriam entered, her heels clicking in a rhythm that always made Claire stand a little straighter. But today she didn't say anything at first, just placed a folded piece of stationery on the counter. Claire wiped her hands before opening it. Tonight, 6:30, library. I'd like your thoughts. Miriam tilted her head. He hasn't used that room in months. Claire tried to play casual. Maybe he's ready. Maybe, Miriam said, watching her. Or maybe he's ready for you. Claire gave her a small, warning glance. Miriam smiled faintly, then turned and left without another word. By the time 6:30 came, Claire had changed into a clean blouse and brushed the dirt from her hands. She told herself it wasn't anything, just a conversation. About books, maybe, or ideas for the garden. It wasn't... She stopped herself. Don't name it. Not yet. The library door was open, the scent of cedar and old pages curling out like incense. Claire stepped inside and paused. Graham sat in the armchair near the fireplace, though no fire was lit. Beside him, a small table held a glass of water and a closed leather journal. The air was still. I wasn't sure if I was late or early, she said gently. You're right on time. She crossed the room slowly and took the seat across from him. The distance between them felt intentional. Not cold, careful. You said you wanted my thoughts? He nodded, his hands folded neatly in his lap. I've been invited to speak at the Community Foundation's summer gala. They want a donation, but also a face, a name, a speech. Claire blinked. And you want my help with that? Graham tilted his head toward her. You speak like someone who understands weight and silence. That's what people listen to. Claire hesitated. I'm just a maid. His expression didn't shift, but something in his voice softened. You're someone who sees things the way they are and still chooses to show up. She looked down at her hands, suddenly aware of how tightly she was gripping them. I'm not used to being asked for that, she said. Neither am I, he replied. The silence between them was different tonight. It wasn't filled with sadness or memory. It was charged, like something waiting to break open. Claire reached for the leather journal. Is this yours? Graham gave a small nod. Elise used to write poetry. That was her notebook. I haven't opened it since she passed. Claire touched the cover gently. You want me to read it? I want to hear her voice again, and I'm not brave enough on my own. Claire hesitated, then slowly, carefully opened the journal. The first page was blank, so was the second, but by the third there were words, faint, looped, a little rushed. She read aloud. Some days the wind sounds like forgiveness. Other days, like something trying to leave. The words hung in the room like dust suspended in light. Graham leaned back, eyes closed. She used to write when she couldn't speak. I always thought I understood her. Until I didn't. Claire closed the journal gently. I think the hardest part is realizing people are more than what we saw. He nodded. And less than what we needed. That one stung. Claire felt it like an old bruise touched too soon. I should go, she said softly, rising. But he didn't move. Just asked, What are you afraid I'll ask? She paused. I'm not afraid of what you'll ask. I'm afraid of what I might say. He stood then, slowly, quietly. His hand grazed the edge of the table for balance, then found its way to hers, not tightly, just enough to feel her there. I don't need you to say anything. Claire looked at their joined hands. She didn't pull away. I don't belong in this house, she whispered. You belong in the parts that are starting to breathe again. A soft knock on the door. Claire stepped back quickly as Eleanor entered, her eyes flicking from Claire to Graham to the table. "I apologize," Eleanor said. "I didn't realize—" "We were just talking," Claire said, clearing her throat. Graham didn't move. "You're welcome to join us." Eleanor walked to the other side of the room, standing near the window. "I came to say thank you," she said, "for the garden." Claire blinked. "You saw it?" Eleanor nodded. "I see everything, Claire. It's how I survived this family." Claire wasn't sure how to take that. Then Eleanor added, softer, "He's not an easy man. He's kind, but guarded. Always has been. Elise was the only one who ever got through. Until now." Claire's breath caught. She looked at Graham. He stood quietly, like stone in the center of a river. "I'm not here to replace anyone," Claire said. "I know," Eleanor replied, "but just because something's been broken doesn't mean it can't hold light." Claire left a few minutes later. The air outside was warm, the magnolia blooms glowing under the moonlight. She walked to her car slowly, her heart louder than her footsteps. And behind her, in the library, Graham sat alone, holding the leather journal to his chest. Not because he wanted to remember, but because he was finally ready to begin forgetting in the right places. The invitation came in a thick cream envelope, hand-addressed in navy ink. Claire found it resting on the kitchen counter beside the morning mail, placed there deliberately, as if someone wanted her to notice it, but not ask questions. She turned it over. The seal was elegant. Raised wax, a gold magnolia pressed into the center. She glanced up. Miriam stood at the sink, peeling carrots with surgical precision. "This yours?" Claire asked. Miriam didn't look up. "It's for you." Claire raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "He asked me to leave it where you'd find it." Claire hesitated, then opened it. Inside, one handwritten card. Langston Foundation Gala. Saturday evening. Accompanied, if you wish. Gee, she stared at the words, her heart quietly rearranging itself. "Am I reading this right?" she asked, half joking. Miriam didn't miss a beat. "If you're asking whether that man just invited you to one of the most exclusive events in Savannah, then yes, you're reading it just fine." Claire exhaled. "I don't own anything that fits gala." Miriam finally looked up. "Then we fix that." By the time Saturday arrived, Claire had been through 2 dress fittings, 3 long phone calls with Debbie at the inn, and 1 too honest conversation with Emma, who offered her favorite hair clip and asked, very seriously, "Are you going to be the lady who makes him smile again?" Claire hadn't known how to answer that. Now she stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric of a soft blue dress she never would have chosen for herself. It hugged just enough, floated just enough. She felt like someone caught between who she'd been and someone entirely new. When she stepped onto the front steps of the Whitaker house, Graham was already waiting. He wore a dark suit, tailored, understated, timeless. No tie, just a pressed shirt open at the collar. Claire stopped. He didn't see her, of course, but something about the way he turned toward her before she even spoke made her pause. "You're early," she said, her voice quiet. "You changed the air when you stepped outside." She smiled without meaning to. "You clean up nice." He offered a half smile. "So I've been told." Once Claire stepped closer. She didn't take his arm. She didn't need to. But he offered it anyway, and she took it. The car ride was quiet, not awkward, anticipatory. The Langston Foundation Gala was held at Mercer House, a grand estate-turned-event space lit by chandeliers and soft music. When they entered, Claire felt the shift immediately, eyes turned. Not cruel, not unkind, just curious. Graham's reputation walked ahead of them like a shadow. She leaned in. You didn't tell me there'd be press. There isn't, he said. They just look the same. He led her through the crowd with quiet confidence. She noticed how people made way for him, not out of fear or fame, but reverence. Claire wasn't used to that. People like her didn't attend galas. They refilled glasses and cleared plates at them. You're tense, he said. I'm out of place. You're the most grounded person in this room. She looked up at him. You haven't even seen the room. I don't need to. She exhaled, but something inside her eased. They found a quiet table near the edge of the ballroom. Eleanor joined briefly, offering Claire a knowing glance. I see you wore the earrings, Eleanor said, nodding toward the delicate pearls. They're lovely, Claire replied. They were our mother's, Eleanor said, her voice measured. Passed down when a woman is ready to carry something precious. Claire froze. Then Eleanor smiled, faint and genuine. Consider this your formal welcome. Claire barely had time to respond before an older man approached the table, glass in hand. Graham, good to see you out. Martin, Graham nodded. It's been a while. Martin turned to Claire expectantly. Graham didn't hesitate. This is Claire Monroe. She's someone I trust. The words landed like thunder in her chest. Not friend, not guest, not assistant. Someone I trust. Martin raised his glass. Then she's a rare one. As the man walked away, Claire leaned in. You didn't have to say that. I didn't have to bring you either, Graham said simply. The music shifted. A soft waltz. Graham turned toward her. Would you dance with me? Claire stared. You dance? Not well, he admitted, but I remember enough. She hesitated, then took his hand. He guided them to the floor, their steps tentative at first, then gradually smoothing into a rhythm. Claire looked up at him. What are you thinking right now? He was quiet for a moment. Then, that I forgot how good it feels to exist beside someone. She swallowed. This is dangerous. Yes, he said, because it feels easy. No, he said, because I could get used to it. Claire didn't respond. She didn't need to. The music swelled around them, and they moved together, one step, one breath, one moment at a time. And somewhere between the chandeliers and the silence, she stopped feeling like a guest in someone else's life. She felt like she'd been invited for a reason, not just to be seen, but to be felt. The gala had ended with laughter, champagne, and music that floated into the night like something half-remembered. Claire hadn't expected to enjoy herself, let alone feel so seen. She and Graham had left quietly, just before the last dance. His hand never left hers during the ride home. But now, 2 days later, the warmth was giving way to unease. It started with the silence, not the comforting kind they'd come to share, but the heavy kind, like something being held back. Graham had canceled their garden walks. He hadn't invited her back to the library. And when she passed him in the hallway that morning, he'd simply nodded and said, "Thank you," as though she were just another guest, not the woman he'd trusted to lead him through a ballroom. Claire folded sheets with too much force, tucking corners like she was trying to hold herself together. Miriam entered, carrying a small package. This was on the front steps. Claire wiped her hands and took it. No return address, just her name, written in careful script. She opened the box slowly. Inside, an envelope and something wrapped in tissue. She pulled the envelope first, unfolding the single page inside. Careful who you get close to. Some ghosts don't want company. No name, no explanation. Claire felt a chill trace her spine. She opened the tissue next. A faded photo. Graham, younger, smiling. Beside him, a woman she recognized from the garden plaque. Elise. They were on a beach. His arms were around her. The sun was setting behind them. But it wasn't the photo that unsettled her. It was the black ink scrawled across the bottom corner. "He's not who you think he is." Claire set the photo down. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, confusion. She didn't know whether to throw it away or demand answers. Later that afternoon, as she polished silver in the dining room, Eleanor entered, her heels muted on the thick carpet. "I heard you received something this morning." Claire turned, guarded. "Mail gets delivered." Eleanor crossed her arms. "Not like that." Claire watched her. "You know what it means?" Eleanor hesitated, then exhaled. Elise had family. Cousins who didn't approve of Graham, thought he wasn't enough, or thought he was too much. I don't know. Some people see grief and smell blood. And you think this came from them? I think whoever sent it wanted you to question what you already know. Claire's eyes narrowed. Do I even know him? Eleanor's voice softened. You know him in ways that matter. Claire looked down at the photo again, still clutched in her hand. I shouldn't have gone to the gala. Eleanor tilted her head. Why not? Because I started to believe I belonged. You do, Eleanor said firmly. But that doesn't mean it'll be easy. Claire's throat tightened. Then why does it feel like everything's shifted? Eleanor was quiet for a long beat. Then, because it has. That evening Claire stood in the garden alone. The air was heavy with jasmine and memory. She stared at the hydrangeas, wondering how something so soft could survive this much tension. She didn't hear him at first, but when Graham spoke, his voice was close. You weren't humming today. Claire turned. Didn't feel like it. I noticed. She nodded, eyes still on the blooms. You've been distant. I didn't mean to be. But you were. He stepped closer. I've been sorting things. Claire finally turned to face him. Like what? My place in all this, in your world, in mine. And did you figure it out? He was silent. Then, no. Claire's voice was low. I got something today, a picture, a warning. His jaw tensed. I thought that might happen. You knew? I knew Elise had people who never forgave me for surviving her. Claire's eyes searched his face. What aren't you telling me? He hesitated. That grief makes people territorial. That when someone new steps into your light, others come for the shadow. She held up the photo. This isn't just a shadow, it's a ghost you're still holding on to. I'm trying to let go. Then say it, she challenged. Say her name. Say you miss her. Say you're scared. His voice broke, just barely. Of course I'm scared. Claire stepped closer. Of what? Of losing again. Of needing someone and not being enough. She softened, but didn't touch him. Then let me choose you. Don't make the choice for me by pulling away. He turned his face toward her. You really want to carry all that? I already am. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick with understanding. Then, softly, Graham reached out. Claire met him halfway. He didn't kiss her. He didn't have to. The way their foreheads rested together under the open magnolia canopy said everything their mouths couldn't. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean. But it was real. And for both of them, that was new territory. And for now, that was enough. The storm started without warning. Not thunder, not lightning, just rain. Heavy, persistent, and quiet in its intention. By mid-afternoon, it had turned the garden into a watercolor painting, lush and dripping, the petals soaked with memory. Claire stood under the kitchen awning, watching the magnolias tremble beneath the weight of the water. It felt like the sky was trying to speak a language she hadn't learned yet. Behind her, the house was still. Too still. She hadn't seen Graham all day. Not since the moment in the garden, not since the picture, not since the silence that wrapped around both of them after everything had been said. Claire had always known something fragile was building between them. But now? Now it felt like they were standing on opposite sides of a glass wall, palms pressed but unable to break through. She moved through her afternoon tasks slowly. The laundry room was warm, the rhythm of folding almost enough to quiet her thoughts. Almost. When she returned to the foyer to collect a parcel, Miriam was there, waiting, her expression unreadable. "He's not himself today," Miriam said, her voice low. Claire looked up. "Something happen?" "I think he's remembering." Claire blinked. "Elise?" "No," Miriam said softly. What it felt like to be left. Claire's throat tightened. "I haven't left. Not yet." The words hung there, no accusation, just truth. Claire opened her mouth, but before she could answer, Eleanor appeared at the top of the staircase, holding an envelope. Her eyes locked with Claire's. "You should read this." Claire took it slowly. The paper was thick. The ink, familiar. It was her own handwriting. She opened the envelope to find a letter she had written months ago. One she'd kept in her drawer at home, folded and hidden beneath Emma's old sketches. A letter she never sent. "To the woman I was before I knew this house." Claire's heart stalled. "How did you get this?" Eleanor's voice didn't waver. "It was mailed to us. No return address. Just your name on the back." Claire looked down at the letter. Her own words stared back at her like a mirror. "You're tired of waiting, of being needed but not chosen. You smile for your daughter, but when the door closes, you cry into laundry and unpaid bills. You want more than survival. You want meaning. But you're scared. Because when someone sees you, really sees you, you won't have any place left to hide." She folded the letter back up, her fingers trembling. "This isn't just someone digging into your past," Eleanor said gently. "It's someone trying to use your honesty against you." Claire shook her head. "Who would send this?" "I don't know," Eleanor admitted. "But Graham will see it as betrayal." "I never gave it to anyone. I never meant for it to be—" "I believe you," Eleanor interrupted, "but that might not matter right now." Claire felt the edges of herself start to fray. "I need to talk to him." Eleanor touched her arm, stopping her. "Don't go to him now. Not like this. Let him come to you." But the idea of waiting, again, always waiting, scraped something raw inside her. That evening she packed a small overnight bag, just in case. She didn't tell Miriam, didn't leave a note. But she did leave something. On the corner of Graham's desk, beneath the leather journal and beside the unopened photo, she placed a drawing. It was Emma's, a picture of the garden, blooming, with 3 stick figures beneath the magnolia tree, labeled, "Me, Mama, Mr. G," and taped to the back one line from her unwritten letter. "Don't let the past make you turn away from someone trying to stay." Claire stepped into the rain, bag in hand, unsure of where she was going, but certain she couldn't stay. Not when trust had been bruised in the same place love had barely begun to bloom. She drove aimlessly for a while, the streets of Savannah blurred by water and indecision. The storm didn't let up. The radio played something soft and aching. She didn't cry. She just listened. Listened to the sound of herself choosing to leave. Not out of anger, but out of fear that staying would hurt more if she had to watch him retreat again. Back at the house, Graham entered the study long after the rain had stopped. His fingers brushed the corner of the desk. Paper, edges not his own. He picked up the drawing first, tracing the lines. His breath caught when his hand moved over the label. Then he turned the page and read the note. His jaw clenched. He stood perfectly still. He knew now. Someone had reached into her private life and used it like a weapon. And he'd let her walk out without asking why. Not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid of what he might hear, of what she might confirm, that loving him was too much work. He stood in the quiet for a long time, the paper shaking slightly in his hand. Outside, the magnolias dripped under moonlight, waiting for morning, waiting for someone to return, or someone to chase. The morning after Claire left, the house felt hollow again. The kind of quiet Graham used to prefer. Clean, undisturbed, predictable. But now it scraped at the edges of his skin like sandpaper. The scent of fresh magnolia still lingered in the foyer, but her voice was gone. Her laughter. The soft rhythm of her footsteps he'd come to recognize like music. He sat at the kitchen table longer than usual, hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't touched. Miriam moved through the space like she always did, quiet but watchful. Finally, she set down a plate of toast beside him. "I take it you found the drawing." Graham nodded once. "She didn't say goodbye." "She didn't have to," Miriam said softly. "She waited long enough for you to ask her to stay." He didn't respond. Couldn't. Miriam sighed, then slid a small card across the table, an address written in her careful print. "She's at the inn, room 4, probably packing up." He traced the paper with his fingertips, memorizing the numbers. "Thank you." Miriam paused at the door. "You know, Mr. Whitaker, when Elise died, you closed every door in this house. Not just to people, to light, to yourself. Claire opened one, and you're standing here deciding whether to close it again or walk through." The door clicked shut behind her. Claire didn't sleep the night before. She laid on the too-firm mattress at the inn, listening to the whir of the old ceiling fan and Emma's steady breathing beside her. The rain had finally stopped, but her mind hadn't. She'd read and reread her own letter, the one that had been mailed without her permission. Her words, raw, unfinished, now living in someone else's memory. She hated how exposed she felt, how her own vulnerability had been weaponized. But more than that, she hated that Graham hadn't asked her, hadn't looked for her, hadn't chased. Emma stirred beside her as sunlight pushed through the thin curtains. "Are we going home yet?" Emma mumbled. Claire ran a hand through her daughter's curls. "We're just figuring out where home is." Emma turned toward her, eyes still puffy with sleep. "I liked the garden. It felt like you." Claire blinked back the sting in her chest. "Me? Messy, pretty, strong." Claire kissed her forehead. "You see more than most." Emma smiled. "That's 'cause I listen with my heart, just like Mr. G. Claire swallowed hard." Before she could answer, a soft knock echoed at the door. Her whole body froze. Emma sat up. "Mama." Claire rose slowly, heart thudding. She opened the door, expecting maybe Debbie, maybe Miriam. But there he was, Graham. No driver, no Eleanor, just him, standing alone with his cane and a soaked collar from the walk across the square. Claire stepped back, startled. "How did you—" "Miriam." She exhaled. "Of course." He tilted his head. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. Emma scrambled off the bed and rushed to him. "You came!" He knelt without hesitation, holding her small hands in his. "I missed your laugh," he said. Claire watched, arms crossed. "She's not the only one who laughed, you know." Graham stood slowly, turning toward her voice. "I know." Claire nodded toward the table. "Want coffee?" "I didn't come for coffee." She leaned against the wall, waiting. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the drawing. The edges were a little wrinkled. "Loved." "I read it, the line you left, and I realized I've been waiting for you to walk away ever since I asked you to stay." Claire's throat tightened. "I didn't walk away," she said. "I left the door open. You didn't come through." "I was afraid." Of me? Of needing you, he said, and of you seeing the worst of me and choosing to go. Claire stepped forward. Graham, someone sent that letter to hurt us, not to help us. I don't know how. I don't know why. But if we let it win, then we've already lost something bigger. He tilted his face toward her. Do you still want to stay? Her voice faltered. I want to be wanted. I don't just want you, Claire, he said. I need you. Not as someone to fill space, but someone who makes space feel like home. Emma tugged at Claire's hand. Can we go back now? Claire looked between them. Her heart felt like it had been cracked open but not broken. Not this time. She knelt beside Emma. If we go back, it's not just to visit. It's to stay a while. Emma nodded. Can we plant more flowers? Graham smiled. We'll make room. Claire looked up at him, her hand still resting on Emma's back. I'm not Elise, she whispered. I won't try to be. I don't want another Elise, he said. I want the woman who hummed my silence into something I could feel again. She rose slowly, and for the first time in days, she stepped toward him. He reached for her, not with certainty, but with hope. And this time, Claire didn't pull away. She held him, fully, completely. The rain had ended. The garden waited, and the house on Oglethorpe Lane would not be quiet tonight. Sunday morning arrived with a sky so blue it almost looked painted. Claire stood barefoot in the garden, mug of coffee cradled in both hands, watching Emma chase butterflies between the blooming hydrangeas. The dew hadn't yet lifted, and each flower shimmered like it had secrets to keep. Inside the house, something had shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no grand declarations, no sudden changes. Just ease. Claire moved through the kitchen like she belonged there. Graham had started meeting her in the sunroom before noon, often already seated with the leather journal on his lap, sometimes not even writing, just holding it. They hadn't defined anything, but every conversation now had weight and warmth. Their silences no longer felt uncertain, just full. Still, a question had been gnawing at Claire since she returned. Who had sent the letter? And why now? She didn't want to let it fester, but Graham hadn't brought it up again. So she didn't either. Not yet. Miriam appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You've got a visitor. Claire blinked. On a Sunday? He's on the front porch. Who? But Miriam had already turned away. Claire walked slowly through the house, heart skipping like a stone on a quiet lake. When she stepped onto the porch, Pastor Reggie was waiting. Dressed in his usual navy blazer, sipping sweet tea like he had nowhere else to be. He stood as she approached. Morning, Claire. Pastor? She said, unsure whether to smile or brace. He gave her a gentle nod. I was nearby, thought I'd check in. Claire tilted her head. Or you heard something. I hear things, he admitted, setting the glass down, but I listen better in person. She sat beside him, letting the silence settle. I saw Graham last week, he said finally. He looked like a man waking up after a very long sleep. Claire smiled. He's different. He's always been this version of himself. He just stopped trusting people to see it. She looked out at the garden. It's hard to build trust when people keep sending shadows. Reggie raised an eyebrow. You mean the letter? Claire turned sharply. You knew? I didn't send it, if that's what you're asking. But I've heard the whispers. She didn't speak. Grief has gravity, he said, and money. Well, it magnifies things. There are people who never liked Graham's silence. Thought it made him weak. Others hated how Elise changed him. Some hated that he changed at all. Claire looked down at her hands. So they sent a warning. They sent fear wrapped in memory. hoping you'd mistake it for truth." Her voice dropped. "It almost worked." Reggie leaned forward. "But you came back." Claire looked him in the eye. "Do you think I made the right choice?" He smiled, kind but steady. "Love's not about right or wrong, Claire. It's about who you're willing to walk through the dark with, even if you don't know where the path ends." She nodded slowly. Before he left, Reggie placed a folded paper on her lap. "Something Elise gave me before she passed. I think it's time someone else saw it." Claire waited until he was gone. She opened the note. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. Elise's handwriting, curved, neat. If he ever forgets how to let someone in, remind him. Love doesn't come to replace. It comes to continue. Claire folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. That evening she found Graham sitting alone in the east sitting room, where the piano had gathered dust for years. He wasn't playing, just resting his hand on the keys like he was waiting for them to speak. "You remember anything she used to play?" Claire asked softly. "Everything." Claire stepped closer. "Do you miss the music?" "I miss the courage it took to make it." She sat beside him, not touching the keys, just near enough to feel the memory in the air. "I saw Reggie today," she said. Graham turned toward her. "He tell you to run?" "No," she replied. "He told me to keep walking." A pause. Then carefully, Claire pulled the note from her pocket and handed it to him. His fingers brushed the paper before taking it. He unfolded it, read it through touch, the silence between each word as loud as the meaning. He let out a shaky breath. "She always knew," he whispered. Claire reached out and placed her hand over his. "She knew someone else would come," Claire said, "not to erase her, but to pick up where she left off." Graham turned toward her, face unreadable. "Are you that someone?" Claire didn't look away. "I want to be." They sat in silence, the piano between them. Then, without a word, Graham pressed a single key. It rang out softly, lingering like a question. And Claire answered it, not with words, but with the gentle weight of her hand covering his again. For the first time, the house didn't just feel lived in. It felt like home. The late summer air hung heavy with warmth, the kind that made every breath feel slower, more deliberate. In the garden, the magnolias were on the cusp of their final bloom, petals curling outward like they knew the season was about to shift. Claire stood at the kitchen window, drying her hands on a towel, watching Graham through the glass. He sat beneath the tree. Same bench, same posture, but something in his stillness had changed. Not withdrawn, focused, as if he were preparing for something. Miriam entered quietly, setting a folder on the counter. "He said he wanted you to have this," she murmured. Claire wiped her palms and picked it up. Inside, a printed program, embossed with soft blue lettering. The Langston Foundation Annual Summer Gala Keynote Address by Graham Whitaker. Her breath caught. She looked up sharply. "He's speaking?" Miriam nodded. "Next Saturday." Claire blinked. "He hasn't done that in years." "Exactly," Miriam said, "which is why everyone's going to be watching." Claire stared at the program like it might vanish. "I didn't know he'd agreed." "He made the decision this morning." Claire felt her chest tighten. "And he didn't tell me?" Miriam tilted her head. "Maybe he wanted to find the words himself first." Later that evening, Claire found him in the study, the room dim except for the soft glow of a single lamp. He sat with a notebook on his lap, pages scattered beside him. His fingers moved across the paper like he was tracing old thoughts into new sentences. She leaned on the doorway. "So you're speaking?" He looked up, startled for a moment, then gave a small nod. "I wasn't going to. I turned it down 3 times. But something changed." "You," he said, like it wasn't even a question. Claire walked in slowly, settling into the chair across from him. "What are you going to say?" Graham exhaled. "That grief doesn't end, that it shifts, that it carves new space." She watched him. "Are you ready?" "No," he said quietly, "but I'm willing." The room held the weight of that word like it was sacred. "I don't want you to do this for me," Claire whispered. "I'm not," he replied. "I'm doing it because I've spent years speaking from silence. It's time I use my voice." She leaned forward, reaching for his hand. "Then let them hear the man I know, the one who listens with his whole body, the one who says more in stillness than most people do with sound." His thumb brushed over her knuckles, slow and certain, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The night of the gala arrived like breath held too long. The Mercer house was lit from within, lanterns swaying gently across the entrance. Inside, guests moved like slow rivers, dressed in satin and silk, whispers trailing behind them. Claire stood backstage, watching from the wings as Graham waited beside the podium. He looked composed. Dark suit, white shirt, no tie again. He never wore ties anymore. She could see his fingers grazing the edge of the wooden stand, measuring it. The host stepped forward, voice smooth and practiced. "Tonight, we are honored to welcome back a man who has given more to this city than most will ever know. Please help me welcome Mr. Graham Whitaker." Applause rose, soft at first, then louder. Claire's heart beat so hard she felt it in her throat. Graham stepped forward. No notes, no prepared script in hand, just himself. He stood in silence for a long moment. Then, without fanfare, he began, "I lost my sight 12 years ago." The room quieted. "I lost my wife 6 months later, and for a long time I believed the world had nothing left to show me." A pause. "I built walls. I convinced myself that silence was peace, that loneliness was safety. And then someone walked into my life who didn't see me as broken. She saw me as waiting." Claire felt tears sting behind her eyes. "She taught me that grief doesn't make us fragile, it makes us honest. That loving again doesn't mean forgetting, it means choosing to risk, to open, to stay." A hush wrapped around the room like prayer. "I am here because someone reminded me that the garden I'd left to die could still bloom." His voice trembled, just slightly. "And for the first time I want to be seen, not for what I've lost, but for what I still carry." The applause was slow to start, one clap, then another, then a rush of sound that felt less like celebration and more like breath finally released. Backstage, Claire wiped her cheek, trembling just enough to have to press her palm to her chest. He came off stage moments later, and she met him just inside the hall. He reached for her instinctively, finding her hand like he already knew it would be there. "Well?" he asked, voice low. Claire stepped into him, her voice tight with emotion. "You didn't speak for applause," she said. "No. You spoke for healing." He nodded once. "For both of us." And as the music rose again in the distance, and the lights flickered across the ballroom, Graham leaned his forehead to hers. This wasn't an ending. It was the moment everything turned toward the light. The next morning, the world felt different. Not louder, not faster, just clearer, as if the air itself had let go of something heavy overnight. Claire woke before the sun, her body still humming from Graham's speech. She moved through the kitchen quietly, making coffee, her fingertips lingering on every surface like she was relearning the shape of comfort. Emma was still asleep upstairs, tucked beneath a quilt she refused to trade for anything fancy, even after Claire gently suggested a newer one. By the time the first rays broke over the trees, Claire was standing barefoot in the garden, mug in hand, watching the magnolia blossoms sway in the breeze. They looked brighter. Or maybe she did. Behind her, the soft sound of the back door opening. Footsteps she'd memorized by now. Graham. He didn't announce himself. He never did. He simply walked until he was near enough that the warmth of his presence filled the space between them. "You're up early," he said softly. Claire smiled, eyes still on the flowers. "Didn't sleep much." "Nerves?" "Gratitude," she replied. He nodded, thoughtful. "It felt like a beginning last night." She turned toward him. It was. He reached for her hand. "Emma still sleeping?" "She'll wake when she smells pancakes." "I brought her something," he said, pulling a small envelope from his pocket. "It's nothing big." Claire took it, carefully opening the flap. Inside was a pressed magnolia petal, wrapped in vellum, and a note. "For the girl who made the garden laugh again." Claire pressed her fingers to her lips. "She's going to keep this forever." "She already gave me something to keep," Graham said. Claire glanced up. "What?" "She drew a picture of you two, labeled it, 'My Beginning.'" Claire's chest ached in the best way. He turned toward the sound of the wind shifting through the trees. "You once asked me what I imagined people looked like. You remember?" She nodded. "Of course. I want you to tell me now. What do you think I look like? To you?" Claire took a slow breath. "You look like someone who stood in the ashes of their life and still chose to plant something. You look like steadiness and sorrow and grace. You look like someone who finally knows they're not alone anymore." His throat moved as he swallowed. "I want to build a life with you, Claire." She didn't move. She just let the words settle like seeds. "I don't need grand promises," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but I need to make one anyway." She smiled, stepping closer. "Then make it. I'll never ask you to erase your past. I'll just hold space for it, the way you've held space for mine." A tear slipped down her cheek, quiet and uninvited. "And I'll never walk away when the silence gets too loud," she said. "We meet it together." Their foreheads met, no fanfare, just skin to skin, breath to breath. The sliding door creaked behind them. Emma stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, holding her favorite stuffed rabbit by one ear. Claire turned. "You're up." Emma nodded. "Is it pancake day?" "It can be," Claire laughed. Graham reached out a hand. "Come here, little gardener." Emma walked into his arms without hesitation. Claire watched them, heart swollen. "Can I ask you something, Mr. G?" Emma mumbled against his chest. "Anything." "If you can't see me, how do you know I'm really here?" Graham smiled. "Because I feel you, and some things don't need eyes to see." Emma considered that, then looked at her mother. "Are we staying forever now?" Claire looked at Graham, then at her daughter. "Yes, baby, we're staying." That night, Claire sat with Graham on the porch while Emma painted wildflowers on small stones at their feet. The sun dipped low behind the trees, turning the sky lavender and gold. "I never thought I'd find this again," he said, voice hushed. "Peace?" she asked. "Home." She rested her head on his shoulder. "This time we build it together." Inside the house, a record player clicked softly to life, spinning an old jazz tune that Elise once loved. The music floated through the open windows, not haunting, not heavy, just present. The garden glowed in the fading light, and the silence between them felt holy, whole, held. The house felt different now, not just lived in, loved in. Claire moved through the kitchen with an ease that no longer required thought. She knew which cabinet creaked, which drawer needed an extra nudge, how the morning light filtered through the magnolia tree at just the right angle to cast a gold stripe across the breakfast table. Graham sat at that table now, barefoot, coffee in hand, his cane resting against the chair. The sunlight painted soft shadows across his face, and even without his eyes, he somehow seemed to be watching everything. "I've been thinking," he said, setting his mug down gently. Claire raised a brow from the sink. "That's always either very good or very complicated." He smiled. "Hopefully the first." He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a folded envelope. "What's this?" Claire asked, drying her hands. "Read it." She opened the envelope carefully and pulled out a letter on Langston Foundation letterhead. Her eyes scanned it. She paused, then read again, slower. "They want me to join the board," she whispered. "As a program advisor," Graham said. "They've been looking to launch an initiative for single mothers. I told them I knew someone who could give it more soul than spreadsheets." Claire's eyes shimmered, caught between disbelief and emotion. "I'm not qualified for this," she said. "Yes, you are," he replied. "You've lived it, built something out of nothing, and you see people. That's more than most experts can claim." She set the letter down. "You believe in me like it's easy." "It's the easiest thing I've ever done." Claire moved to the table, sitting across from him. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. "You know this changes everything." "It should," he said. "We didn't survive what we did to stay the same." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll do it, but only if you promise to be brutally honest about my first draft proposal." He grinned. "Deal." Before either of them could say more, the front door opened with a soft creak. Eleanor stepped inside, dressed in a soft green shawl that matched the tips of the garden leaves. "You two are up early," she said. "Planning our corporate takeover," Claire teased. Eleanor arched an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "Only if you hate change," Graham replied. She gave him a look, fond but laced with her usual protectiveness. "I came to ask something," Eleanor said, her tone shifting slightly. Claire stood, pouring her a cup of tea. "Ask away." Eleanor held the cup but didn't drink. "I'd like to plan a reopening of the garden," she said. "A small event, nothing too grand, just a moment for this house to breathe out." Claire blinked. "A public event?" "Sort of, close friends, a few donors, people who remember Elise, people who need to see what's become of this place." Graham nodded slowly. "You think it's time?" "I do," Eleanor said, "and I think Elise would have wanted it." Claire exchanged a look with Graham, who gave a small, quiet nod of approval. "I'll start working on invitations," Eleanor added, "and I'll need Emma to be our official garden ambassador." Claire laughed. "She'll take that more seriously than you can imagine." "I hope so," Eleanor said. Then her gaze softened. "You've made this place softer, Claire. Not weaker. Just more alive." Claire's throat tightened. "Thank you." After Eleanor left, Graham turned toward Claire again. "She means that," he said. "I know." They sat together in the stillness, the kind that no longer felt empty. Later that afternoon, Claire found herself in the garden alone, trimming back one of the rose bushes. Emma was painting signs for the reopening, bright yellows and blues, her handwriting crooked and perfect. Claire looked up when she heard footsteps on the gravel path. Eleanor stood there again, but her expression was more private now, more unfinished. "I was wrong about you," she said, not waiting for a prompt. Claire set her gloves down. "You weren't the only one who doubted." "I wasn't trying to protect Graham from you," Eleanor said. "I was trying to protect him from hope." Claire said nothing. "I watched him fall apart after Elise. Watched him build a life so still it started to sound like grief breathing. And then you walked in, without asking to fix him, without needing anything." "I needed a job," Claire whispered. "No," Eleanor said, You needed truth, and you gave it without asking for anything in return. Claire looked down. That's how you stay safe. You give more than you expect. Eleanor nodded slowly. I lost someone once too, she said. He asked me to move away with him. Start over. I said no because I was afraid I'd disappear. Claire's voice was soft. Do you regret it? Every day. Claire reached out, placed a hand gently on Eleanor's. Then we'll make sure this garden never forgets what love feels like. Eleanor smiled, tears pooling quietly in the corners of her eyes. That evening, Graham stood at the edge of the garden path, listening as Emma read aloud from a list of flowers she'd named herself. The laughing lilies, the sleepy vines, the never-give-up roses. Claire looked at him from across the blossoms. Do you think it's ready? She asked. He smiled. It's been ready since the first time you sang to the silence. The garden was dressed in its best. Paper lanterns floated between magnolia branches like glowing pearls strung through the air. Claire had spent the entire morning making sure every chair was angled just right, every pathway cleared, every petal in place, not because it had to be perfect, but because today mattered. Today was a memory waiting to happen. Guests began arriving as the sun slid toward late afternoon, each one pausing just before stepping through the garden gate, as if the stillness asked for permission, as if even the breeze knew to whisper. Claire stood by the fountain, her hands tucked in front of her. She wore a soft cream dress with pale green embroidery near the hem, chosen by Emma, who insisted it looked like something a garden would love. She turned as footsteps crunched lightly behind her. Graham. He wore slate gray, tailored but soft, like the edges of winter giving into spring. His hair had been freshly trimmed, and though he couldn't see the crowd forming beneath the tree canopy, he stood with quiet command, as though he felt every presence, every pause. You smell nervous, he said. Claire laughed under her breath. Is that your superpower? Among others. She touched his arm gently. You sure you're ready? He turned his face toward her. I've never been more sure of anything. Emma raced up the stone path, her white sundress fluttering, a crown of clover woven into her hair. She was carrying something wrapped in a cloth napkin. You forgot this, she said, breathless. Graham reached out, carefully unfolding the napkin. Inside was a tiny magnolia seedling, its roots carefully wrapped in damp soil and linen. Claire looked at Emma, eyes soft. Is that? She found it in the corner of the yard, Graham said. Said it needed a name. Emma beamed. I named it Hope. Graham nodded. Fitting. The ceremony wasn't formal, it wasn't announced. But slowly the guests began to gather near the back steps of the house, where a simple wooden trellis framed the garden's heart. Eleanor stood just behind them, arms folded, her eyes brighter than usual. Reggie took his place beside the trellis, Bible in hand but closed, as if to say this moment was already sacred enough. Claire stepped up with Graham, holding his arm as they stood together in the hush. Reggie smiled. Some ceremonies are built from tradition. Others are built from something deeper. He looked at Claire. This isn't about starting something. It's about recognizing what's already grown. He turned to Graham. Do you bring your story here today? Not to end one chapter, but to invite someone into every chapter after. I do, Graham said without hesitation. And Claire, Reggie said, voice gentle, do you come not to forget where you've been, but to carry it forward with someone who's finally ready to walk beside you? I do, she whispered. A pause. Then from Graham's coat pocket he pulled something small and carefully folded. Not a ring, a note, wrapped around a tiny ribbon of silk. He offered it to Claire. She unfolded it slowly. The words were embossed in braille, but also printed beneath. as if meant to be read by more than fingers. Some roots grow in silence, but they bloom louder than any storm. Claire pressed the paper to her heart. Graham leaned in, lips near her ear. "That's from the first journal entry I wrote after you." Claire's eyes brimmed. "You didn't need a ring," he said. "You brought me back to the garden. That's our promise." Claire nodded, voice caught in her throat. "I'll never leave," she whispered, "even when the flowers fade." Applause rose quietly, not loud, not showy, just full, honest. Eleanor stepped forward next, placing her hand over both theirs. "I think Elise would have liked this," she said. Claire looked at her. "You think?" "I know," Eleanor replied, "because I've never heard this house breathe so easily." The rest of the evening bloomed slowly. Guests sipped lemonade beneath the lanterns. Children chased fireflies across the lawn. Emma played her favorite piano piece on the old upright Reggie helped move from the church. And as the moon rose over Oglethorpe Lane, Graham and Claire stood beneath the magnolia tree, their hands intertwined, roots wrapped not in earth, but in time. "You okay?" she asked him softly. "I'm more than okay," he said. "I'm finally home." She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. They didn't need music or speeches, just the sound of petals opening in the dark, and each other, always. The house on Oglethorpe Lane woke slowly now, like it had nothing to prove, nothing to defend. Morning came not in rushes, but in quiet rituals. The scent of coffee drifting through the kitchen. The creak of the front porch swing. The sound of Emma's voice humming a tune only she seemed to know. Claire stood in the doorway of the garden, barefoot, a mug in one hand, her other resting lightly against the wooden frame. The magnolias were in bloom again, fuller than last year, wider, like they'd grown used to being cared for. Behind her, Graham walked without his cane. Not because he didn't need it, but because he knew every step now, every crack in the stone, every bend in the path. He'd memorized the world by feel and heart and scent. He moved like a man who finally trusted the ground beneath him. Claire turned when she heard his approach. "You left your coffee?" she said, holding the mug out. He took it with a smile, brushing her fingers. "You always know." "Old habit." He sipped, then tilted his head toward the garden. "It's louder this year." Claire looked around. Birds nested in the oaks. Bees flitted through wildflowers Emma had planted without asking permission. The wind rustled the chimes Eleanor had hung last fall. "It's lived in," Claire said. "It should be loud." Emma's laughter floated out the window. She was upstairs in her room, probably trying to turn her homework into a fairy tale again. "She's growing fast," Graham said quietly. Claire nodded, smile soft. "Sometimes I look at her and think, did I raise her or did she raise me?" "She brought us both home," he said. They walked together, slow and unhurried, along the garden's edge. The morning dew still kissed the petals. The sun hadn't climbed too high. It was the kind of day that didn't ask for anything, just offered peace. "Reggie called yesterday," Graham said. "He wants us to speak at the Foundation's spring retreat." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Us?" He said, "People are asking for our story." She laughed gently. "We're not exactly a Hallmark movie." "No," Graham said. "We're something messier and more real." She nodded. "Then maybe that's what they need to hear." They stopped at the bench under the magnolia, their bench. He sat first and she followed. Silence settled around them, but it was the good kind, the kind that let everything else breathe. Graham reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Simple, hand-carved, smooth from being held too often. Claire's heart paused. He opened it. Inside was a magnolia-shaped pendant on a silk ribbon. No diamonds, no glitter. Just truth. I didn't want a ring, he said, because rings can get lost. This you can wear when you want, or not at all, but it's yours, like I am. Claire swallowed, blinking back a sudden wave of emotion. It's beautiful. It's not a proposal, he added quickly. We already chose each other. She smiled, tears caught in the corners of her lashes. Then what is it? A promise, he said, that no matter what happens next, I'll stay rooted. Claire took the pendant, pressed it gently to her chest. I've been waiting my whole life for someone to mean it when they say that, she whispered. I do. They sat for a long time like that, hands entwined, future unwritten, and no longer afraid of the blank page. Later that afternoon, Emma came running down the steps, barefoot like her mama, with a folded piece of paper flapping in her hand. Mama, Mr. G, look! She held it out proudly, a drawing of the three of them under the magnolia tree. This time there was a sun in the corner, and tiny hearts blooming from the flowers. I'm calling it our family tree, she said. Claire wrapped an arm around her daughter. That's exactly what it is. Graham leaned down. You missed something. Emma looked confused. What? He reached out and tapped the base of the tree. You forgot the roots. Emma frowned, then smiled. That's 'cause they're under the ground, like the parts of us nobody sees but that hold everything up. Claire looked at Graham, stunned. He nodded toward Emma. Told you. She's the wise one. That night, long after the sun had tucked itself behind the trees, Claire stood alone on the porch. She listened, the wind, the chimes, the sound of the house breathing beside her. Graham stepped out, hands in his pockets. You okay? He asked. She nodded. Just full. He reached for her, pulled her close. She rested her head on his chest, and for the first time in her life, the sound of someone else's heartbeat didn't make her feel small. It made her feel held. What do you think this is? She asked, barely above a whisper. This life. This moment. Graham thought for a long beat. Then he said, It's not perfect, but it's true. Claire closed her eyes, letting the truth of that settle in her bones. And as they stood wrapped in the hush of a life rebuilt, not from wealth or rescue or fairy tale, but from kindness, forgiveness, and a garden that refused to die, she whispered, That's all I ever wanted. Graham held her tighter, and the magnolias bloomed again, just as they always had. Quiet, software unbreakable. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought matter to me either way.